caught yourself saying, no worries? Well, I'm Steph.
And I'm Steph, and we have some worries. Hi, I'm Steph with an F.
And I'm Steph with a PH, and welcome back to Some Worries, the podcast brought to you by two anxious bitches.
Hang out with us today while we talk all things books in today's episode, The Books That Made Us. So, Steph, why don't you start us out with one of the books that made you?
The books that made me who I am. I'm so ready for this. So excited.
Both of us have big old stacks next to
yes.
us, so I hope you're ready because
Yes,
we are very passionate bookish nerds.
we are. So if you're on YouTube, you'll be able to see these covers as we hold them up and do our best Vanna White impressions. If you're listening on audio, that's cool. Just when you're, if you're interested in any of these books, just go look them up after we talk about them and look at the covers. You'll see what we mean.
Yeah, we'll post stacks of both of ours on Instagram so you can see them.
That's a great idea. Okay, we'll definitely do that. My first, though, now that we've just said that, the first book is not one that I own, so I do not have. I'm not going to be able to Vanna White it. I know. That's okay. Just everybody can use their imagination, right? We're readers.
Yep.
We can use our imagination. So the first book is one that I read so many times, and I would get this from the school library. I think I was in like maybe fourth, fifth grade. I would go to the school library constantly and just like check this book out. It was a series, and it was Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark.
I don't even think you need a Vanna White that one. People know what that is.
People should know. I feel like it's pretty iconic. It just, especially for a certain type of reader, it's probably something a lot of people who are listening maybe grew up with as well. I just loved those stories so much. And it's, it's a series, there's multiple books. So what I would do is I would go to the school library, I would like check out the first one and I would read it. And then I would take it back and I would check out the second one and then I'd read that and then I would get the third one. And I swear, like this was back when there were library like actual cards in the backs of the book.
It was just like your name over and over.
It was my name over and over again. Like maybe one other person occasionally would check these books out. The school librarian probably thought I was bananas, because I just like loved this series so much. I probably should have just like begged my parents to buy it for me as many times as I checked it out from the library.
Yeah.
Or just maybe tried to get it at the Scholastic Book Fair. I don't know, but I always just checked it out of the library.
I mean, that's what libraries are for.
Exactly. This is just like the magic of libraries, especially for kids. Like it's, so shout out to librarians for not judging youth who check out the same book over and over again. But I just love them so much. They are, the drawings are kind of like spooky, like black and white drawings. All of the stories kind of have a twist in them at the end, which I loved trying to guess. Like the first time I read them, of course, trying to guess the twist. By the time I read them multiple times, I knew everything. But I just always, even though I knew the twist, I still loved reading them again and again. They were just my favorite.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I don't really reread books that much, but I have a couple on my list that I have reread multiple times. So my first one is The Humans by Matt Haig. This is the British cover. When I lived in the UK, I was lucky enough to intern at this publisher. And they were kind of like, you're interning for free, so take books. And so I had heard of this author, so I picked it up. I'm going to tell you what it's about. Preface this by saying it sounds very sci-fi, and it is a little bit, but it is not a sci-fi book, if that makes any sense. So basically, there is this human mathematician that solves the equation that would let humanity build and create whatever we wanted. And there's an alien race that decides that humanity is not ready for that. Which honestly, we are not.
Reasonable.
So they send an alien down to kill this guy, assume his life, and find and eliminate anyone he would have told this answer to. So that's the setup. It sounds like very sci-fi. It sounds very like spooky. It's not. So this alien takes over his life, and throughout the book, realizes all of the things that makes humanity humanity, and he falls in love with peanut butter and classical music and the family dog, and just really realizes how beautiful humanity can be. And so it's really emotional in that sense. And then this man had a son who is suffering from depression and having possible suicidal thoughts.
Mm.
And near the end of the book, he pens a letter essentially to Gulliver the son that is called Advice for a Human. And I literally have one tab in this book
Yep.
that goes directly to this chapter, which I also have dog-eared, and I never dog-ear books, but this chapter is so important. I often go back to this chapter when I'm having some hard times or thoughts, um, and just reread it. And it actually, eventually Matt, because we're friends, I
Your
guess. I don't know.
BFFs. Yeah,
We're
yeah.
besties. Um, he wrote a book inspired by that section called Reasons to Stay Alive,
Mm.
which is a nonfiction book inspired by his own battle with depression.
Hmm.
And yeah. So anyway, I love that chapter. The
Yeah.
book really reminds me what it means to be human, what it means to be alive, like
Mhm.
appreciating little things like peanut butter and classical music and cuddling with my dog. And it just really changed me and made me who I am. So
Oh.
definitely check that one out.
Oh, that's so cool. I also really love that that book is it's something that I think a lot of people it's very stigmatized. You know, we are at our core here, we're talking about mental health in a lot of our
Mhm.
episodes. And something that is highly stigmatized in mental health spaces are things like suicidal thoughts. It's something
Yeah.
that I think people are afraid to talk about. They're afraid to ask if somebody is having those thoughts. They're an extremely common symptom of depression, like
Mhm.
extremely common. So for people who are dealing with depression, it's very likely that they may experience that at some point. And the fact that like Matt, your BFF, can, talk about these things in such a really unique and really intriguing way, like using aliens to think of like what it means to be human. Like I just think that's so cool. Like that sounds
Yeah,
like a great book. I'm gonna
it
have to
is.
read it after this.
Highly recommend. I just bought a paperback edition of the book that is gorgeous. Didn't need
Mm.
it, but I was just like, I need multiple copies on my shelf, I guess.
I mean, I think we like many readers who are listening will probably relate, but anytime you find like a great book that you love and then you find a new edition that has a gorgeous cover, it's like, I know I don't need it, but it would be beautiful on my shelf.
Exactly.
Yes.
All right, what's
Uh,
another one for you?
Another for me. So now I can go to my stack. I do the rest of the books I'm going to talk about. I do have copies of them.
Okay.
So the next one I have is a book that I read a lot growing up. The Secret Garden. It's a classic.
Yes, it is.
I feel like this book seeded perhaps my great love of Gothic literature because it's just these young children who are at the start of the story little terrors.
Mm-hmm.
They have not come from loving backgrounds. They have not learned what it means to love and what it means to care for others. They are just like little monsters running around this manor. But they find this secret garden, and it's like behind this mysterious door, and then they go back, and of course it needs work. Like it needs to be brought back to life. And so slowly through the process of the book, they're learning how to love and care for each other and to care for this garden. And it's just like it's both very heartwarming to sort of see this progression of the characters becoming themselves. But also, I spent my entire childhood looking for secret gardens. I was always like, oh, I wonder if there's like any secret gardens like behind that house, or and I feel like it really seeded my love for like secret locations and secret places, and I was always sort of like looking for that secret garden, when I was a kid. So just a really, again, sweet story with a lot of like good lessons for life, but also just some real cool setting details that have not left
Yeah.
me even as an
Have
adult.
you read it recently?
I haven't. And actually it was funny when I pulled this off my shelf, I'm like, I should read it again because I don't, it's been so long. And what I remember most is just sort of like the discovery element of like finding this location and like finding friendship and finding love and finding companionship and all of those things. That's what I remember. But I don't know how much of that is, the bulk of the book. So I really should reread it again. Have you read it like recently at all or no?
No, I'm
Okay.
like, I've been trying to think of the last time I read it. I mean, I was probably in like fifth grade or
Yeah.
something.
Yeah,
It's been a
same.
while.
It's been a long time. I don't even know how old I was when I read it for the first time. This isn't obviously is not the copy that I would have read then. This is like a I'm holding up like a Barnes and Noble Classics edition that I just sort of own. Um,
Don't
but
you wish that you still had those books that
yes,
you read when you were a
yes.
kid? I
Oh my
have like
God.
a couple, but
Mhm.
I really wish I had like those actual ones that I read.
Yes. Yeah, I can't tell you how many like old Goosebumps books. I
Right?
wish I still had. Oh, I
Yeah.
loved them so much. I think I reached a point when I was in maybe like college age or so where I just started purging a lot of that stuff because I'm like, oh, I don't need it. And now I'm like, ah, dang, I wish I'd kept it because it would be so cool to like hold the same book that I held when I was a kid. And
Hmm.
there's just something about like that tactile memory. But,
Yeah,
what are you going to do?
seriously. So, speaking of college, the next one I read for the first time as a freshman in college.
Ooh.
It's The Perks of Being a Wallflower by Stephen Chbosky. Um, to anyone listening, Steph will know this, but when we were preparing for this episode and I was trying to find all of these books on my shelf so that I could show them if you were watching on YouTube, I couldn't find this one and I legitimately had a panic attack
Mm-hmm.
because
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't find this one copy that I have read probably at least 15 times. Um, Starting freshman year of college, I read it every year for the next 10 years or so. I haven't read it in a couple years and I should. I don't write a lot in books or make notes or anything, and this is like the one book that I have because there are lines in it that like every time I read it means something else, means something
Mm,
different to me. Um so yeah, these are I only have two books that really deal with mental health in my
yeah.
list. This is one of them.
Yeah.
Um I just really related to Charlie and his like struggle to make friends and his awkwardness and his mental health. I don't have experience with his actual story of what happens at the end, which I won't say in case you haven't read it. But it is just it's just another book that like reminds you to be alive. And I was lucky enough a few years ago to actually meet the author,
Mm.
because there's a line in the book that says Charlie's been writing letters to some person that we don't know the entire book, and at the end he decides to stop writing letters, and he says, "Please believe that things are good with me, and even when they're not, they will be soon enough."
Mm.
And when I met the author, I had him write "They will be soon enough," which I now have tattooed on my arm. If you're watching on
Oh, that's
YouTube, you
cool.
can see it. If you're just listening, yeah. So in the author's handwriting, tattooed on my arm, and I can just like look down when I am struggling and just remind myself, like, okay, things are not good right now, but they will be soon enough.
I love that. I didn't know that
Yeah.
the tattoo you had was in his handwriting. That's so
Yeah.
cool.
All of my tattoos that are words are in the creator's handwriting. So
Oh
I have
man.
like that one. I've got three that are song lyrics written in the songwriter or singer's handwriting. I have one that's written in my own handwriting, one that's in my parents' handwriting. So I really like that kind of tattoo. Feels
Yeah.
more personal. I don't know.
Yeah, definitely to have like that because that person wrote it, even though it's, being tattooed on like it's like that person wrote it on your arm. It
Yep.
means something more. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
cool. Oh man. All right, well, it might be a tough act for me to follow because I don't have any tattoos for this next book.
That's okay.
But I'm also going to kind of pivot to college at this point.
Okay.
And so the next book I have, it is I picked this one book but it's also kind of maybe a category of books. So I'll sort of talk about that. This one is called Comfortable with Uncertainty by Pema Chodron, who is a Buddhist nun. Um, I this is something maybe we'll get into in some other episodes of the podcast. I don't know. But I definitely went through a journey, we'll say, growing up in a very Christian community and going to church a lot, and also going through a phase, not really a phase, an understanding, we'll say, that that was not the right path for me, and sort of losing touch with that faith and really but then struggling with that, really like the typical Christian to agnostic pipeline that I think a lot of people find themselves on. And I really, in my late teens, early 20s, was when it was hardest, because this was when I was starting to kind of figure out what my values are and what kind of life I wanted to have. And that seemed to be so much in conflict with the kind of life that a lot of people around me had and wanted, which was based in many ways in a religion that I no longer felt a part of. So this book and many others like it were books that I read during the time, because I think just desperately searching for answers to what it means to be human, like going back to what you were talking about with Matt Haig. I probably maybe I should have read that in college. That probably would have helped. But it just trying to kind of find those answers for myself. And for me, Buddhism was one of the directions I turned to a lot. I also read a lot of philosophy. So when I say this is a category, this is me I got this at Borders. Do you remember Borders? The bookstore.
I love Borders.
I know, I miss Borders so much. I would go there and I would just like wander sort of like the spiritual section, looking at all the Buddhist books. I would wander the philosophy section. It was just like me, I think, kind of searching for answers and to figure out like who I am. And so this book is both a great book in general, because it is a collection of Pema's teachings that are all based sort of in Buddhist thought. So it's a lot of advice for meditation, advice for living your life with compassion for others, which are all things that were really important values for me and continue to be today. This is one of those books I still pick it up and read it, like especially if I just kind of want a short, I don't know if you can see on video, but like they're really short chapters. They're just like a few pages, and they're just really brief sort of topics talking about various things about what you might be struggling with, and really the idea of being comfortable with uncertainty. Talking as an anxious bitch, uncertainty's hard, and so that this book for me, I think, is like a good reminder of continuing that practice of trying to be more comfortable with all of the uncertainties of life. But yeah, so this is one that I think was really is a really good example of how central this sort of book was to me. Also, aside, I ended up, I loved these books, and a lot of the books that I would pick up were from one specific publisher. And I ended up moving to Boston years later, was in grad school, and ended up seeing an internship posting for this publisher. And I was like, oh, I'm going to apply. That would be really cool. And I ended up getting it. And I worked with this publisher for like 3-4 years. It's like a weird full circle moment to have been this kind of lost person reading these books and trying to figure out like who I was. And then, several years later, to be standing in the publisher's office and to be working on these books. And it was like this kind of mind blowing, like, whoa, what is happening moment. That is just really cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Also, I know that the point of this is to talk about books that made us, but I'm going to give a recommendation to you.
Oh yeah. Give
also by Matt Haig.
Okay.
He's one of my favorite authors. He wrote a book called Notes on a Nervous Planet, or Notes from a Nervous Planet. I can't remember exactly.
Okay. I feel like I've heard of this title. So yeah.
Yeah, it is nonfiction, and it also has very short chapters like that are observations on different things about humanity and anxiety. And so I would highly recommend that one to you. Nice. And everyone who's listening.
So did Matt pay you to put you up to this, to just push all his books?
Matt did not pay me. I am doing it for free because I just love his book so much.
Sponsored by Matt Haig. I'm just kidding.
Absolutely not. He does follow me on Twitter, I think, which is kind of fun.
Your BFF. I love it.
All right, another one for me. Yes. This one is just a short little thing, maybe not. So one thing that I think is very, very important is representation in media. Books, TV, everything. And I have no hair if you're watching or if you're listening. I think I've already mentioned that in like every single episode we've recorded, but
in case
I
you've
have no
missed
hair.
it.
In case
Yes.
you missed it. And being a, you know, a young girl and now a woman in our society with no hair is, as you can probably imagine, a bit of a struggle because I don't look the way women are supposed to look. And so I have never seen myself in anything growing up. I feel like these days there's like a few more representations here and there. There's, you know, Ayanna Presley,
Yeah.
who is yeah, who has
She's
alopecia.
amazing.
Jada Pinkett Smith has alopecia.
Hmm.
There's a male actor, I can't remember what his name is, but he was in the show Gotham and he
Oh, okay.
has alopecia. But that only happened recently.
Hmm.
So I read a book called Mosquitoland by David Arnold, which I loved, and I was lucky enough to befriend David and
Another BFF.
another
This is just your BFF
this one
pile.
though, David and I actually are friends. Matt and I just have met him, but
Hmm.
like that's it.
Matt's a
Um
future friend. Yep. Yep.
I wish he's an amazing author.
He sounds great. Yeah.
Um I became friends with David, and then he wrote this book called Kids of Appetite, which is about a cast of characters. One of the characters has that, oh my God, I can't remember the name, but that's like the condition where you can't move the muscles in your face. And
Mm,
so
okay.
obviously this character looks very different from how people are normally looking.
Hmm.
And um near the end of the book, they go to the Empire State Building, this character and one other person, and kids being kids, there is a kid who asks, you know, what's wrong with your face?
Hmm.
And he says, he like bends down and he asks like what color the kid's hair is and what color his eyes are. And he says, so you know how you have brown hair and blue, or brown hair and blue eyes, and some people have no hair and green eyes. And he's like just saying like people have their own things. They look a
Hmm.
certain way. And when I read that, I have no hair and green eyes, if you're only listening. And um I just like started bawling because like
Aw.
it's literally like what, 5 words, no hair
Hmm.
and green eyes, but I was just like overwhelmed, and I texted David and I was like, I am not arrogant enough to think that this is me, but this really meant a lot to me. And he was like, full disclosure, it is you. And
Aw.
I'm gonna cry right now. But it just really, really meant the world to me. It was the first time that I had seen myself, and it wasn't even like more than 5 words. It wasn't this huge thing, but it was just really, really meaningful to me. And it further fueled my personal like passion for representation in media, which is still to this day really important to me and something that I really champion working in books.
Yeah, that's so cool. And now if there are any other little girls who have no hair and green eyes, they get to see themselves in that too, which is just
Yeah.
such a gift. Like something that I'm sure when you were young would have meant so, I mean, it means so much to you now, but also if you had been younger and read that, like I
Yep.
can just imagine like how much that would have opened up your world. So that's so
Yeah.
cool.
And it's actually an argument that I use with kids to this day. Even recently, actually, I
Really?
had some kids that were asking, and
Mm.
I literally used the same argument. I was like, you know how you have brown hair and blue eyes, I have no hair and green eyes. It's just what we look like, and
Yeah,
it actually works. So
that's
that's good.
great. It's giving you like a language now too for like dealing with the question. Like that's so cool.
Yeah. Usually I just say some women don't have hair,
Yeah,
which
which
is
is
true,
true.
but
It's true. Not, yeah,
kids are
yeah,
kids, man.
yeah. Well, I'm sure whatever kid it was, they're gonna remember that. Because I think about when I was younger, whenever somebody was just really honest with me about those things, that's what sticks with you. You're like, oh, okay, cool. And the kids are so great too because a lot of times you tell them that they're like, oh, okay, got it, and they just like go
Hmm.
about their lives, which is just so precious. So,
Yeah.
yay, I love that.
All right, what's next for you?
All right. I'm gonna hold up this book, and it's gonna seem pretentious, but let me explain. Okay. This is A Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man by James Joyce.
James Joyce.
Yep. Which
Okay.
again, I know sounds pretentious. But back to the aforementioned struggling with Christianity. If ever anyone struggled with Christianity, it's James Joyce.
Yes. Facts.
Yes. So I read this in college. I was taking a class, I think, on like modernists. So we read Joyce, Forster, Virginia Woolf, all these different, writers of that time. And I remember reading this. When I first picked it up, I was just like, ugh, whatever. I'm probably like, what? It's some dude. Who cares? I feel like I had a little bit of an expectation going in that it was going to be kind of like, And then I started reading it and I was like, oh my God, there's so much of this that is like me. It was this most bizarre experience to be like, wow, there's a lot of me in this book. Like I felt like connected to this person who lived in like the early 1900s in Ireland dealing with Christianity. Like it was the same themes, the same things that I was struggling with. And I think what was powerful about this book for me was that the a lot of it is like kind of autobiographical to Joyce's life, not 100%, but a large part of it. And I just started to sort of realize all the questions I have are the questions that he had, and he had already thought through a lot of it. So I was able to go through these thought experiments, sort of, because a lot of it's very philosophical. That's why I'm like, this is going to seem pretentious.
Yeah.
But being able to like walk through his train of thought as he was struggling with these same thoughts and see them sort of in this fictionalized way, I feel like it helped me make a lot of positive strides toward accepting where I was with my relationship to religion in general, but especially Christianity. And it helped me kind of forge a new path forward. So it's just one of those books that I always look fondly on because I'm like, wow, it really made this huge impact on my life. So for the religious trauma people out there, if you haven't read it, it may interest you. So
May help you out.
it may, yeah. And you can look real pretentious while you read it.
More power to you, I guess. So I'm gonna actually go back to childhood for my next two. So Peter Pan. If you are watching on YouTube, that stack of books is all like 10 copies of Peter Pan.
So cool.
I collect it. And I love the story, but for me, the thing that it reminds me of to this day, obviously there are issues with Peter Pan, but it reminds me to just keep a childlike curiosity to the world. And also remember to not always take things too seriously, because I do tend to do that. I tend to take things I know, you're shocked. I know.
An anxious bitch who takes things too seriously? What?
So I just try to remember, not everything needs to be serious. Have fun with life, and just be curious and have fun. I actually have a tattoo that are the directions to Neverland. It was my first tattoo. That also reminds me of that. So I just love this story.
That's so cool. Oh, I love that you're pulling out a classic.
I had to have one. You've got a couple, so I had
exactly.
to have like one.
We've got a good mix.
Classic. Yeah. I tried.
I'm going to go for my next one. I'm going to go opposite of a classic. This just came out a few years ago. I could look at the copyright page and tell you exactly, but I'm not going to. You can all just guess. It was recent.
Okay. All right.
But my next book is The 10,000 Doors of January by Alex E. Harrow.
Yeah.
And I don't know, Steph, if you've read this book or not.
I own it.
You own it? Okay. Well, I'm going to talk a little bit about why it's important to me, and maybe you'll be compelled to read it. I think for me, both it's just a really good book, and really wonderful writing. And I just I've read everything by this author. I just think she's incredible. So there's that element. But I remember reading this book, going in without knowing much of anything about it. And I started reading, and one of the characters is I'm going to try to do this spoiler free, so I may sound a little vague. I'm going to do my best. But But one of the characters is the setting is in Kentucky, and I grew up in Kentucky for those who don't already know. And I've always had a really complicated relationship with where I grew up, in part because of the religion stuff, but also just in part because of just some of the things. I think a lot of people who grow up maybe in the South may have similar feelings
Mhm.
about some of the history that is, embedded sort of in the culture there, and that kind of coming up against maybe some of your values or your thoughts or your feelings about the world now, sort of the idea of tradition versus sort of modernity in many ways. So I've always had sort of this complicated relationship, right, with like where I grew up. This book was just really wonderful because I got the sense reading this, and the author is also from Kentucky. I was just like, she gets it. Like she, just reading it, I could feel so many of the thoughts and feelings that I've had about sort of where I grew up, which is that it's a beautiful place and that there are really wonderful people there and there are things that feel like home. But at the same time, the character in this book wants to leave and wants to go somewhere else and wants to find adventure. And I just think about like if I had read this when I was maybe a little bit younger, I think about how much this would have meant to me. I mean, obviously it means a lot to me now too. But I'm like, wow, this could have really saved me a lot of feeling bad about wanting to leave maybe. And again, I don't want to spoil too much about this, but it's just it's a wonderful book. And it's very rare to find a fantasy book that's set at least in part in Kentucky. Like I just don't think that
Yeah.
there's a lot of that out there.
Yeah.
And so to like come across that, it just was this incredible kind of reading experience. So 10,000 Doors of January.
Nice.
Hmm.
All right, so I am in childhood again. Um,
Taking it
I
back.
I'm going to talk about this and another series that both of us have read.
Oh, okay.
Um,
I'm
that we
excited.
have complicated feelings about.
Oh, okay. Oh, that one.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay, gotcha. Now I'm following.
So this is Artemis Fowl by Owen Colfer,
Mm.
which is an incredible middle grade fantasy series about a little genius shithead. He is. Artemis is a shithead.
I love it.
And he- he's he's a criminal. Like he's just like a criminal mastermind. So
Mm.
like he's 12, so he's a shithead, you know. Anyway, so it has like fairies and leprechauns and all of that, and it's just so fun. It's really funny. It's fantasy, so it's got like all of these things in there. It's also like kind of crime heisty sometimes.
Mm. That's
Um,
nice.
and it's really good. And I've read the entire series. And for me, I was reading it, and I don't want to like combine these because they are very separate in my head, but I was reading them at the same time as Harry Potter.
Mm.
And I know both of us have very complicated feelings about Harry Potter and
Yep.
about JK, who is
Mm.
a turf. And for me, like I don't engage with Harry Potter at all anymore in any
Mm.
way. And so I feel like these books have become even more important to me over the last few years, for a few reasons. One, because like I have loved them since I was like 11 years old,
Mhm.
and I can trust that the author is not a piece of shit. Um,
That always helps. Helps the
that always
enjoyment
helps.
factor.
And then I was actually like, this is going to be a little bit of a humble brag, I guess.
Do
Um,
it. I'm ready for it. Hit me with it.
I was very, very lucky to work with Owen and his co-author and illustrator on a graphic novel at my last job called Illegal. And
Mhm.
even luckier still to actually tour with Owen, Andrew, and Geo. And I got to like drive them around and like
Oh, nice.
chauffeur them around the Midwest.
That's so
But as you
cool.
can imagine, being in a car with them for hours at a time and helping them at school events and at events, like we became friends. And
Yeah.
so like to be able to kind of tell my 11-year-old self like, bitch, you are friends with Owen Cole is mind-boggling.
Yes.
And he is just as smart and funny as his books, and he's gonna make fun of me for this entire section of like fangirling over him because it's ridiculous. And we make fun of each other all the time,
Mm-hmm.
but it is just such a cool like full circle moment, and to have this series and this author like still be a major part of my life is very cool.
Yeah. And we can add this to your BFF list. I feel like we need to have that running through the whole episode. It's just like, here's Steph's author BFFs. Boop, 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 boop.
Matt Haig, David Arnold, Owen Colfer.
Yep,
Unfortunately, not J.M. Barrie.
soon. Soon.
Hopefully, not too soon. I'm not quite ready to die.
Fair. Fair. I mean, I was thinking more of like a seance or something, but you're right.
Oh, okay. Well, let's do that. That'll be our third spooky episode.
We'll do that maybe in October. We'll just hold a seance on air. Oh, that'd be great. Man. Oh man,
your turn again.
Okay, it's my turn. So my next book, this is one probably a lot of people have read, and if you haven't read, you've probably heard of it. It's by Patrick Rothfuss. It's The Name of the Wind. Obviously a very iconic fantasy novel. The reason why it's... What? Did you say you haven't read it?
Steph. Do I need to?
Oh, I mean, I love it. I mean, that doesn't mean that you have to read it just because I love it, but let me talk about
know what I like, though. You think I'll like it?
I think you might. Yeah.
All right.
Let me talk about it a little bit, and then you can tell me if that sounds like your jam. Again, I'm going to try to do this without spoilers. I'll do my best. So the reason why this is on my list is I read this book during a really hard time in my life. I was working at a job that was making me miserable. I was super burnt out. I was struggling. I was trying to leave the job. Was not getting a lot of, we'll say, interview emails, emails to interview with people. I just felt stuck. I was like, I am stuck in this shitty situation and I want out, and I was like ready to blow up my life, whatever I needed to do to get out of it, right? So I ended up reading this book during that time. And for those who've read this book, you'll know what I mean when I say that every time the main character, he's sort of telling his story throughout the course of this book. And it's a series. The two books are out. There's a third forthcoming whenever the author is ready to release that. But for now, the first two are out, and they're both wonderful.
Is it gonna piss me off that one's not out yet?
I mean, I'm okay with it because I feel like it's not like it ends. If I remember correctly, it doesn't end on like a crazy cliffhanger where you're gonna feel like betrayed. Because it's just sort of like you're hearing this. It almost makes sense because throughout the whole conceit of this is that the main character is telling you his story over a period of time, and so you get tidbits of his life early on, and then you come back to present moment, and he's taking care of stuff and taking care of business, and you sort of see modern day what he's up to, and then you go back into the story. So it feels very rhythmic in that way, where you're kind of going back and forth. So when you kind of hit the end of the second book, you're ready to sort of be back with the main character, and you're kind of waiting for him to start the story again. So for me, it feels okay.
Okay.
Others may have different opinions. This is a fandom community where people are very eager for the next book, but the author has been very forthcoming with it'll be out when it's out, bro. And so I feel like we have to respect that. He will get to it when he gets to it. So anyway, let me get back to what I was going to say about this. No, it's okay. I just tend to ramble when there's books I like, and I just start not making sense. So again, the reason I loved this is because I was going through this really tough time in my life, and the main character, every time something good or even kind of neutrally positive happens in his life, another shitty thing happens to just completely upend it, which maybe sounds like the opposite of what I needed at this time, but it actually helped me because I was reading about this character who was going through worse shit than I was. And I was feeling really crappy about where I was, but I was like, well, at least it's not that bad. So a little bit of that, but it also was every single time something bad happened, the character comes back and he keeps trying and he keeps going after the things that are important to him. And no matter how many times he gets knocked down, he gets back up. And it was just this really helpful thing to read. And also it's a honkin' book. So, I mean, I read it over a significant period of time. It's over 500 pages. And then there's the second book, which is also a huge honkin' doorstop of a book. So I spent a lot of time with it and being able to sort of feel that a bad thing happened, but we're coming out of it and things are changing. Like to have that kind of repeatedly as a mantra in my brain really helped me. It also helped me as a writer because I think during the period of time when I was reading this, I was also working on a novel that was not really working out well. And part of it was because there just wasn't enough conflict. There wasn't enough bad stuff happening to the characters. And I was like, oh, I need to probably take a little bit of a leaflet out of this book and have some shitty stuff happen to my characters so that I have more, they have more agency and they can, grow as people. So it's sort of like as a double kind of importance to me, both in terms of just getting to that period of my life, but also as a writer, taking a lot of kind of insight from how he chose to write these characters. So that's my rambling answer. But Name of the Wind is really wonderful fantasy book just in general too. So even if you don't have, if you're not going through a hard time in your life, you could still read it and still really enjoy it.
I need to add it to my list for sure.
Yeah.
So my next one is The Falls by Ian Rankin. So this is Scottish crime fiction. When I was an undergrad, I was part of the residential honors program where we were, and
humble
if
brag.
you are just listen, well, this is even more of a humble brag. If you're just listening, I'm about to use air quotes, but part of the residential honors program, after our sophomore year, we were required to study abroad because, it's like such a hard thing to say yes to. And we studied abroad in Edinburgh, Scotland. And we went with a history professor and a literature professor. And the literature professor obviously taught a class on Scottish literature. Shocking, I know. And he was great because we had like old Scottish literature and much more modern Scottish literature, such as The Falls. And I have read all of Ian Rankin's books now. If you are watching, that entire top shelf and some of these books are all Ian Rankin's books.
Whoa.
I own literally every single one of them, which is like 30 at this point, I think.
Wow.
He is the author that I own the most books from. And I read this before we went to Scotland, and all of his books, but especially The Falls, is very focused on Edinburgh, and it makes Edinburgh a character in its own right in the books, as part of the story, part of the action. It makes things happen, and I just completely fell in love with Edinburgh. And then I went and fell in love even more. And I was lucky enough after my junior year to go back to Edinburgh as a mentor for the students who were then studying abroad. And I was writing my honors thesis for undergrad and decided to write it on Ian Rankin and his books. And it was the city of Edinburgh as a character in Ian Rankin's books. So add another one to my BFF list, I guess.
Yeah, there we go.
I got to meet and interview Ian.
Of course you did.
As part of it.
Expect no less.
And he's amazing and super funny and very nice. And I just did a deep dive into his books about Edinburgh. And then that led into when I was pursuing a master's degree, I looked back at Scotland because obviously it was like a lot of things tying in together, but his books really did inspire my love of Scotland. So this is like the 12th book in the series, I think. And I don't even know, something like that. Highly recommend if you like crime fiction and if you like Scotland. But yeah, so this is just like an important part of my like journey after college.
Yeah, that's really cool. I knew you went to Edinburgh for like grad school and all of that. I didn't realize you had also spent time over there undergrad, reading all of Ian Rankin's, catalog.
I love them. They're so good.
Oh man. And it's like for that book, is it a series where like a lot of mystery or crime where you can just kind of pick up whichever one
Yeah, you can pick up
Perfect.
anywhere throughout the series. If I convince people to read Ian, I always recommend starting with The Falls just because
Okay.
that's where I started and
Hmm.
it's just a really good book. Um it's all focused on one detective inspector named John Rebus, who is a cranky old Scottish man who drinks and smokes too much. You know, true like
Yeah.
crime fiction
Yeah.
hero. But it's just really fun to like read all about Scotland. His earlier books, you know, it takes a while to get to know John Rebus and the other characters. And I personally like Siobhan is a character in the series that I really love. So she's in this one. So
Mm.
I always just recommend starting with The Falls.
Nice. Okay, I'm putting that in my back pocket
Yeah.
for later when I'm at the bookstore.
Nice.
Yeah. All right. Well, my next book, um, I'm this one's really important to me as a writer.
Hmm.
It's also just well, I'll tell you the title and then you'll know why. So is this is the fifth season by N.K. Jemisin, which is part. There's the first book in her series, Broken Earth. I mean, this series is a masterpiece, and I do not use that term lightly. This is just like the best goddamn series in the world. I'll say it. Like it's just so good. And I don't want to ruin things, don't want to spoil things, but it tackles so many issues that are forefront right now in our world, tackling issues of like climate change, issues of race, legacy of slavery. It also really dives deep into like character level issues, things like mother versus daughter. What do you do when you live in a broken world? Do you try to repair it or do you let it burn? It's just there are so many of these like philosophical questions in this book, and also just it's just a wonderful story. Like the magic system in it is so cool. The characters, they're all going through a lot of shit, but you feel for them. At least I did. I just even when the characters were at odds with each other, I was still like, I'm on your side, and I'm on your side, and I'm on your side. You're all right. Like all of you are correct in how you are approaching this situation, because it's just the way that she's just written such amazing characters. Like they are just such full-bodied people.
Hmm.
And just as a writer reading this, I was like, dang, like the bar is high. The bar is really high. Like I remember reading the series all the way through. When you first start the first book, there is you don't know who's telling the story. You just there's a some perspective of somebody who is sort of telling the story,
Hmm.
and it's in second person, which for a lot of people they don't like second person because they're like, I don't, it just feels kind of alien or strange, like why isn't
It's
it in
hard
first
to read
person?
at
It can be
first.
hard to read, yeah. And this is one of those books where I was like, I'm going to stick with it because I can tell there's something happening here. I don't know what it is yet, but I know this second person's in here for a reason.
Yeah.
And it's for a very good reason. You read the whole series. I remember reading the whole thing and then being like, I have to go back and read the first chapter of the first book again. And I did, and it blew me away. And I'm like, how did she do that? She must have just written, and I've looked at for like interviews with her to figure out, did she write the whole series before, publishing them? Because I'm like, how else would you be able to do what she did? You would have to be so good at planning it. And maybe it's just because I'm not good at outlining. I don't
Maybe
know.
she had really detailed outlines.
Yeah, that could be what it is. But just the fact that she was able to pull that off, mm, chef's kiss. It's just so good. So I also remember not too long ago, someone on the internet said, and I quote, that they read this book and it was, using air quotes, everybody, it didn't live up to the hype. And I was like, you're wrong. You're wrong. You're objectively wrong. I'm normally the kind of person who's like, not every book is for everybody. Everybody has a different experience with reading. It's okay that we have different opinions. No, that person was wrong. This is the greatest series in the world. I stand by it. So,
Nice.
and I close my case and pass it on to you, Steph. This is now me just defending the author against random people online. That's how passionate I am.
I mean, fair enough. So we have two more each, or I have two more. Do you have two more?
I have one more.
One more. Oh,
Okay.
yeah. Okay, that
Okay.
works. Okay, so this one is a work of art. it is both a very good book, but also literally a work of art. It's called S. It's by J.J. Abrams and Doug Dorst. It comes, if you are only listening, I apologize because you will kind of miss some of this, but please go Google this book and look it up. It comes in a case. When you pull it out, it is a completely
Ooh.
different book called The Ship of Theseus by V.M. Straka. It is meant to look like an old library book. It even has like the library sticker on it. It has the like book for loan stamp on the inside. And the setup here is this is a book written by a fictional author in our world, but a real author in the world of this novel. And it is a library book that two grad students are like using for research purposes, and they end up writing back and forth in the margins to each other as they are unraveling the mystery of the Ship of Theseus and V.M. Straka, who is an enigma and is like a complete mystery. So the cool thing about this book, and I really like books that have kind of different storytelling methods. So like if you're reading a book that has emails, text messages, newspaper articles, etc., I love that. This book takes it to a whole nother level because it literally has those things that you can pull out. So it's got letters in here that you can pull out. It's got postcards from Brazil that like have stamps and notes on them.
Look at that detail. Like that's crazy.
Yeah. It's got like this little like compass thing.
Wow.
There's one somewhere in here where there's literally a napkin. It is a napkin. Let me see if I can find it. Oh, here it is. Literally like a floppy freaking napkin that has been written on. And then all throughout the book there are these margin notes where they are talking back and forth to each other. So you could read this book like over and over and notice something new every time. There's like a card with a newspaper article clipping in it that looks old. It's insane. And this book came out in like 2013, which is right when I was graduating with my master's in publishing. So I knew I already wanted to work in publishing. And then I read this and I was just like, this is literally why I want to work in publishing, because books are so fucking cool.
Yeah.
And they could be these incredible works of art. And I haven't unfortunately been able to work on a book like this, mostly because most publishers aren't insane enough to do books like this, because I cannot even imagine how much this shit costs to make.
To hand put things in certain pages and to have all of that stuff separately printed.
That costs money. Yeah. You have to like print the book, which it's a hardcover, so it's already going to be expensive. But then, yeah, to print all these separate things and to insert it, I mean, that costs like a lot of money.
A lot.
I'm trying, let's see, does the box say? The box doesn't say how much I paid for this, but I think it was like a good, oh wait, here it is. It was $35 in 2013. So these days, it's probably at least $50.
Yeah.
It is very worth it. I was telling you about this book a couple months ago, and I said that it was out of print. They weren't selling it anymore, but I recently saw it at Barnes and Noble because I think TikTok found it, and TikTok is like bringing this shit back, which they're doing with so many backlist books.
Yeah.
So anyway, it is a complete work of art. Highly recommend. It's just like, it's a fascinating story, but it is just a book that I love having on my shelf. I literally like display it on my shelf halfway into the sleeve so that you can see like both things.
Yeah.
Just is so good. It's so
That's
good.
so cool.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
All right. And here's your last one.
My last one. Drum roll. So this book, I'll tell you the title first and then I'll talk about it. It's A Psalm for the Wild Built by Becky Chambers. I know you've read this and also love it. I might have Did I convince you to read this?
You did. You
Yeah,
did. You
yeah.
told me it was a comfort read, and
It
it
is a
is.
comfort read. This was a pandemic read for me. I was going through a period, and other people maybe can relate to this. I do read a lot. I also write a lot, and I was going through a period of time where reading was really hard. I just because of all the stuff that was going on in the world, I was just feeling, I don't know, like I was having a hard time focusing on any reading. If the
Mhm.
book had too many bad things happening, it just made me feel kind of worse. Like I was just really like struggling.
Mhm.
I ended up finding this book and I read it. It's technically a novella.
Mhm.
It's a
It's a
thin
little
little book.
baby.
It's a little baby book. But this book is just like a warm hug.
Mhm.
It's just this most sweet, comforting story. It's a world where this is sci-fi, for those who are, interested. And it feels like it's a world where people fucked up, but they've learned their lesson. So there's just like a lot of hopefulness of like humans are okay actually, and there's a lot of good in humanity, and that also is really cute because it follows the tale of a human and a robot. And there's a lot of questions about like what does it mean to be alive, what does it mean to be a person, what is personhood. It also is really sweet because the main character is non-binary and is part of this religious order, and instead of referring to them as like sister or brother, they refer to them as sibling, which I just think is like so cute. I read that, I was like, oh, that's so sweet. It's just such a wonderful book. So if anybody needs a comfort read, honestly, I've heard that I haven't read the rest of Becky Chambers' books yet. I know she has like a whole catalog. I will get to
Mhm.
it because I've heard that all of her books are kind of like that. They all are really comforting, sci-fi worlds where, yeah, bad things have happened, but people are pretty okay. And I'm like, yeah, I need more of that in my life.
Yeah, I read that after you recommended it, and then I read A Long Way to a Small Angry Planet, which is the
Oh yeah.
first in her like most popular series.
Hmm.
And yes, it is similar. I think not quite the same level. Like there is
Hmm.
more bad things.
Sure.
But it's like a whole cast of characters and it's really fun. Um, yeah, she writes good books, man.
Yeah, she does. If you're out there,
And the
Becky,
sequel to that, the sequel to A Psalm for the Wild Built is out now.
it
So
is. It's on my shelf. I have it. I've earmarked it. It's like a. I know that
same.
I'm. Yeah, I'm waiting for when I need it. As weird as that sounds, so it's just on my shelf for when I'm in that period of time where I'm like, I really just need to be comforted.
Yep,
That's when I'm gonna read it because it's
same.
just that special.
Yes.
Mhm.
All right, so my last book
Woo!
is called Boyfriend Material by Alexis Hall. This is a queer rom-com about two messy bitches.
Our favorite kind of story.
It is literally my favorite kind of story. Because that's how people are. Nobody
Hmm.
is perfect.
Yes.
So I was lucky enough to work on this book at my previous job. Um, and it changed my career. And like, if Alexis is listening, he's gonna be like, ugh. But it did because so I both of us worked in romance for a long time. Um, and the landscape of romance publishing has vastly changed over the last 5 or 6 years. It used to be very much focused on mass market romance, which mass market romance is like if you think about like books that you would buy at Walmart in like the small or the grocery store, like the
Mhm.
small little size, that's mass market. Um, and it has shifted to trade paperback, which if you are watching, you can see. If you're listening, it's like that larger paperback size that you would kind of associate with most fiction these days.
Mhm.
And the way that you publicize and market those books is completely different as well. And so when we started acquiring these books at my last publisher, I had to completely change how I did my job. And I had to make new contacts in media and social media. And the way that I pitched had to change and everything. And so, Boyfriend Material was my biggest book that year because Alexis is very well known and the content is incredible. And so it was a really big campaign that I got to put together, and it just changed everything and was very successful. The sequel, Husband Material, has come out recently. Highly
Yay.
recommend you check that out. And there's going to be Father Material in a couple years, which will be the third book.
Ooh.
And I love it because of that impact on my career, but then also just because I really love this book. It's really, really funny. The main character, Luke, has some mental health struggles, and he is a messy ass bitch. And he would say that he was a
Oh, I'm
messy ass
sure.
bitch.
Yeah.
And so I really love it. And I love that it has been such a big part of my career.
That's so cool. Oh, I love
Yeah.
that. And I love all your humble brags today. They've been
I
great.
feel
They're
kind
fuel
of
with
like a
me.
dick
No, 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 no. I'm just
being like,
like,
I know this author and this author
yeah,
and that,
hair flip.
but yeah, hair flip.
Yeah.
But
Um,
I've just been really lucky that I've been able to meet a lot of my favorite authors, or at
mm,
least be able to talk to them online.
yeah,
Uh, so I guess it is a little bit of a humble brag.
a little bit, but it's okay. I mean, I think that's one of the perks of working in publishing is that you get to meet all of these authors in person,
Mhm.
um, and you get to like form new relationships with them, which is just really cool.
Yeah.
I didn't mention, I can humble brag now too. I didn't mention this earlier, but the Pema Chodron book, I did get a chance to meet her. She came to
Nice.
the publisher's office, and she was just like, I don't know, just the tiny, she's tiny. I don't know. She's just like a tiny person. I don't know. And I just saw her and I was like, oh my God, she's amazing. I don't know. It's like something about meeting your heroes. You're like, oh my God,
Yeah,
they're
it
there.
is a bizarre but wonderful experience.
Yes. Yeah. And she
Yeah.
was so sweet and so nice. And, I feel like she was probably just like patting me on the head, like, okay. Because I was just like, oh my God, you're so, I love your books. And she's like, okay, nice to meet you. Bye.
Walk away.
Yeah. Like,
So we just gave, I think, about 16 book recommendations,
did.
all of which we obviously highly recommend. But
Mm-hmm.
we would also love to know what books raised you, what books made you into who you are, what books
Mm-hmm.
made you think or cry or uh, change your outlook on life. So let us know down in the comments if you are watching on YouTube. If
Mm-hmm.
you are listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, head over to our Instagram and let us know. And thanks so much for listening to us basically babble at you for however long this has been.
Yep.
We love talking about books. So
Mhm.
don't forget to follow us on Instagram and TikTok at Some Worries Pod and like and subscribe to the podcast, please. We have been Steph.
And Steph. And now that we've talked your ears off about books, we need to go read some more. Like we have more on our shelves that we
Yeah,
need to get to.
I have way too many I haven't read.
Yeah. So we got to go read those. Okay.
Okay,
All right.
bye.
Bye.